Here is Stefania Cassini, and you're watching Without Your Hat.
Welcome to the station of decapitation without your head. I'm Nasty Neal, and I'm joined by Annes Elwy. I hope I said that right.
Annes Elwy, very close.
Elwy. All right, great. I'll edit it, and everyone will think I'm smart. And director Lee Haven Jones of The Feast. It's very cool to have you here.
Really nice to be here.
So it's been at festivals, but it's coming out Friday at select theaters, I believe.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
That's very cool. So, first of all, how did you get involved?
Well, it was conceived by myself and Roger Williams. We worked together quite a bit on other projects, and we decided we wanted to make a movie. And here it is.
Yeah.
It's always a good start, right? We're big fans of horror. I used to watch films, slashers usually, back in the 80s. I was probably massively too young to be watching them, but there you go. And then of course we're kind of rather taken with the recent crop of elevated horrors by the likes of Ari Aster and Jordan Peele and that sort of crop of films. And we decided we wanted to make a singularly Welsh horror film that could speak to cultures throughout the world. The Feast is our expression of that idea.
Yeah. Is that hard to do, to make something that's specifically Welsh, but at the same time can appeal to audiences around the world?
I had sounds rather lofty, but I had Bertolt Brecht resonating in my head when I did my degree many years ago. I remember reading that he said in order for something to be universal, it had to be local first. So we decided we'd make this sort of culturally specific piece of work, and then in the hope that it would sort of translate to other cultures. I mean, there are definitely archetypes within the story. We have drawn on Welsh folklore, and of course, we all know that folklore throughout the world they tend to draw on the same kind of topics and the same kind of issues. And even within the characters, I think there are archetypes there that are very recognizable. So hopefully, we've achieved the holy grail of making something that has cultural specificity, but that also kind of manages to go beyond cultural barriers.
Mm-hmm. And Annes, how did you get involved, and what interested you in the character?
Lee approached me. We were at BAFTA Awards a few years ago, and Lee came up to me and said that he had a horror script that he wanted me to look at. And so he sent me the script, and I started reading, and I just loved it. Every page, you just wanted to see what happens next, because so many bizarre, unexpected things kept happening. And for ages, you just don't understand why and what will it lead to. And especially for my character, who appeared to be in it throughout, but had very little to say, but was actively doing a lot. She was constantly preparing, and came with a lot of ideas and was there to shine the mirror up to the characters and punish them in their own individual ways. And they're not necessarily bad people, but they are misusing the planet or abusing themselves, or all of these different roles. So it was a really interesting part for me to have the prospect of playing. So there was absolutely no way I would have turned it down, because it was a real gift of a role. And also just as a script in general, to get a Welsh language piece like this was really exciting.
It's not a traditional movie, or definitely not a traditional character or story arc. So how is it? How do you approach a character like that?
I think it was initially I had to figure out how many social skills she would have learnt and picked up from, and how human she was as this sort of partially human, partially spirit, and just she was nature. So figuring out how you're going to play her was fun to have to think about. But as soon as we kind of landed on it, it all felt like it really made sense, and it came quite easily just to be this presence. And I'm sure a lot of it came down to how it was filmed and all of that sort of stuff, but it felt very comfortable, weirdly, to play someone so strange. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And Lee, why did you think of Annes, and why do you think she was right for the role?
I knew immediately she was right for the role. I mean, she's a prodigiously fantastic actress, and has the ability to sort of be expressive without having to utter words. And of course, we had this sort of challenge at the beginning of the piece, in that we had written this character who doesn't actually speak that much. So I needed somebody who could convey a breadth of sort of meaning and emotion, and Annes was that person. I mean, what I love about what she does is that she's almost sort of like it's a really brave performance, because I think she's almost like a tabula rasa. She's like a clean sheet of paper. And I think what happens is then that audiences get drawn into that and start to wonder, what's she thinking? Who is she? Where's she from? Or how is she responding to this thing? And they start to project their own feelings and thoughts onto her. And I think that's really brave to do from an acting point of view, because within acting training, there's this idea that you always have to be doing something. And I think what Annes sort of does is she's sort of in the present and in the moment, and allows the story to sort of come through her. I think was it T.S. Eliot who said that a good piece of writing is like a piece of glass, and in a way that's what Annes is. She's allowing the script to kind of come through her.
It was a really fun, because it's kind of, it releases you of all the things that you're taught. You have to be funny and entertaining, and you have to be good company, and you have to be so much all the time now. And I think to be allowed to just abandon all of that and be a little bit like when you see babies on buses, and they'll just stare at you if they want to look at you, and they will stop looking at you when they've had enough of looking at you. And you could just retreat back into being a person who isn't trying to please anybody. So it was a really relaxing role to be allowed to play, actually.
Interesting you said that, because along those lines, the movie itself isn't like a lot of modern movies, because it's very slow paced, and I don't mean that as a negative, because I like 70s movies that are a slow burn or whatever. But going, when you had at festival stuff, were you surprised like people took to it, or did you have any like oh, maybe this will be too slow for certain audiences?
I think it is too slow for certain audiences, but I've always been obsessed with slow cinema, actually. So it's sort of a bit of a nod of the head to slow cinema, and also I think that in terms of the kind of film I wanted to make, I didn't want it to be a slasher. I wanted it to sort of grip people psychologically and to inflict psychological terror on them, and I think we achieved that to one degree or another. Of course, some people will not like that. I think we live in a culture which is about instant gratification, and of course, this movie is a warning against instant gratification. So I think it would be a bit strange if we were to sort of be telling this message and then giving a sort of a wham bam kind of very cutty kind of film to the audience, because it is about sort of, take your foot off the gas. That's the message. So and the film literally, form does mirror content in that sense. But of course you're not going to please everybody all the time, right?
Yeah.
And I think a slow film like that is is quite difficult sometimes. And it does, we were saying before, it demands a lot of the audience. And I think with a film like this, it'll also depend what mood you're in as an audience member when you're choosing to watch the film, whether you're in the right mindset to be slow and wait. Because I think it's rare for us to be okay with that sort of feeling. It makes you agitated and it makes you uncomfortable, and you'd rather just understand and know where you're at. So I think you might hate it one day and actually come back to it a year later and be ready for it.
Yeah, it's my kind of movie though. I like movies, and I also like movies that don't tell you everything up front. You have to think about the movie.
Well, the genesis of that is that, the writer, Roger, and myself, we have spent a long time making broadcast television. And I think television, in contrast to film, is a very literal kind of medium. And I think we end up spoon feeding audiences and often chasing the narrative and providing lots of plot for people to sort of follow. And this is, I guess this is anti-television in a way. It's sort of for my, I guess this is my interpretation of cinematic and what it is to be cinematic. Some people hate it, but that's okay. That's fine.
Anna's brought up like the social commentary, nature, and how do you balance that? Because you want to say something, but at the same time, you still are making a movie and want to tell a story, so you don't want to hit people over the head with certain things.
No, and hopefully, I mean, it's always balance is tricky, isn't it? And it's always hard to sort of to make your point, but not to sort of make it too stridently, I guess. But if anything, I think my vision of this film is that it sort of errs on the side of ambiguity, so it doesn't bash people over the head with a message. In fact, just kind of delving into sort of reviews of it on social media, I think one of the things is that maybe it's too subtle, perhaps. Maybe given the nature of the crisis that we're facing, maybe it should have been a bit more heavy-handed. And that's maybe one of my regrets.
Now, Lee said he's a horror fan. Are you a horror fan, Annes?
I definitely wasn't before I did this. Like when Lee first mentioned that it was a horror, I instantly was a bit like, oh, I don't know about horror. But I don't know where that judgment had come from, really. I just sort of blanket banned them. I had been terrified of them when I was younger, and watching just things like Blair Witch Project and Buried Alive, all those things. But I thought it was amazing that films that are fake, that they can make you feel something, like they can make you feel scared. And I think fear is one of the emotions that we so rarely actually feel, or we'll feel them very briefly. So I was always aware that they had this power, but I'd never gravitated towards them. And I think this film has really changed my feeling towards them, and I'm much more open to them now. And now that I'm also just more aware of all the things that are out there, like Censor and St. Maud, and all these things are new and exciting and really appealing. I think as long as there is a truth and I think for me, a horror needs to be a little bit bizarre for me to love them.
I think that's a good message. Censor is great, by the way. I was lucky enough to see it at the theater. They were playing in Boston when it came out.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good movie and a Welsh movie.
Yeah, yes.
We're getting quite good at making horror movies, the Welsh.
Yeah. How do they play it in Wales? Are the Welsh fans of horror movies?
Well, to be honest, this film has only played at one festival in Wales. So the film hasn't been released in Wales yet. I think it's going to be released in sometime next year, early next year. But it went down really well at Abertoir, which is Wales's horror festival. To be honest, there's such a dearth of material, particularly cinematic material, that's been created in the Welsh language. I think any time a local audience sees something that is familiar to them, they lap it up and they love it, because we consume a lot of content from elsewhere. So anything that's homegrown is a real treat, I think.
Did both of you get to go to any festivals and watch a movie with an audience?
We both got to go to London Film Festival and Abattoir, which was amazing because we just managed to have a cast and crew screening just before lockdown. And so we watched it in the safety of all of us together. We all knew what the film was, and it was really exciting to celebrate it. And then to watch it, years later in a film festival with so many people watching it for the first time, I found quite terrifying, to be honest. But it seemed to go down really well. Yeah, and I'm glad we got to at least go to those two, because obviously we've had to miss most of the film festivals this year.
Yeah, I mean, it was thrilling to see it on that screen at the London Film Festival. The screen and the sound system at NFT1, which is the theatre, is extraordinary. So it was just delightful to see it, and in amongst 400 people kind of all enjoying what we'd created. Annes is right. It's been a bit frustrating in that, we opened at South by Southwest. We then went to Busan in South Korea. We then went to Switzerland, Neuchâtel. We then went to Lisbon, and we've been unable to go to any of these festivals. But we'll always have London, like characters in a Chekhov play. There's always London, like there's Moscow.
All right. Was it hard to find the perfect house for the movie?
Actually, the filmmaking gods were smiling on us, because I did a sort of a cursory look online of possible locations, and I found about 4 or 5 houses. We visited, I think, about 3, and this was the third house. But at the moment I saw it, I thought it was amazing, because the film is heavily influenced, I think, by that sort of aesthetic that you get in a Korean horror movie. And when I saw it, it just reminded me of, a lot of people have said it reminds them of Parasite. The only problem is that Parasite wasn't out when we made this film. So this sort of predates Parasite in that sense. But the house had this sort of Korean kind of stroke Japanese aesthetic that I just thought was brilliant. And also, rather ironically, it was called T. Bowed, which in English translates as Life House. And I thought that was hysterically funny, considering the death and destruction that occurs in there. So Roger and I, the writer, we went to see the house and kind of just fell for it. I was like, this is amazing. And then we reincorporated the fact that it has this sort of meditation cell, and we wrote that into the movie. Yes, it's a strange and unique place, I have to say.
Well, it's interesting. You wrote something into the movie, so that the house actually influenced the movie in a way.
I think so. I tried to do that. It's the same with working with actors. They're prodigiously more creative than I can ever be on my own. So the director's job, I guess, is to sort of listen to what is in front of him, and then respond accordingly and incorporate those elements and try and work with them and play with them. And that goes from sort of the location through what the other creatives have to offer or what the actors have to offer. It's a process of collaboration along the way, which is not to say, I think it's a particularly sort of strongly authored piece of work, but I didn't do it alone. I'd love to claim all the credit for it, but I had some brilliant collaborators.
Yeah. Annes, you mentioned some modern horror movies. So did Lee ask you to watch any like horror movies specifically, leading into the movie?
I think, was it Dogtooth you got me to watch?
Yeah, which is not a horror movie, which is quite interesting.
No, but it was a brilliant reference, and it really helped me just get the feeling for that type of film. And maybe Under Her Skin potentially also. Yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because people often ask me what films or what directors I'm influenced by, and I sort of fudge the question, because when I'm approaching a piece of work, I quite like to sort of clear my mind of the noise and just respond to the script and the location and the actors, which is not to say that there are lots of influences bubbling away in the subconscious. And, I think Dogtooth, just in terms of the strangeness of the family in that Yorgos Lanthimos film, there are definitely parallels with the family in The Feast. And then Under the Skin, I think the journey of Scarlett Johansson's character is not dissimilar to the journey that Caddy goes on, in that she's discovering this world afresh. Lots of different influences, really. But I don't know. I quite like. I'm not one of those directors who says, "Oh, this film reminds me of that, and therefore this is what we're going to make." I just what you kind of want to make something fresh and new.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Feast comes out Friday at select theaters, and it's also in video on demand and digital. And I really enjoyed it, and so did our Ashley, who does our written reviews on the website.
Oh, brilliant! That's good news. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you both for doing this.
Thank you very much. Cheers. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bad dreams. This must be